Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something pretty unique this time. We're going to be designing a fire station.
A whole fire station? That sounds ambitious.
It is, and we've got some really interesting source material to work with, design guidelines, of course. But also there's this fascinating story about an architect pitching her design to the mayor. And it really gets you thinking about the impact a building can have.
Oh, I love it when the source material gives us those behind-the-scenes glimpses. It really helps us understand the context.
Right. Like this architect is trying to convince the mayor to invest in a truly unique design for the fire station, not just a cookie-cutter building.
Because a fire station should be more than just functional. It should be a symbol, right? A reflection of the community it serves.
Exactly. And the architect actually argues that a well-designed fire station could be even better advertising for the town than any billboard, which honestly made me think of all those landmark buildings we associate with certain cities, like the Space Needle or what's that opera house in Sydney that looks like giant sails?
The Sydney Opera House, yeah. Iconic. It's amazing how certain buildings just become symbols.
Totally. Okay, so speaking in context, our sources describe the site for this fire station as having two distinct personalities. There's Main Street, which is historic and charming, lots of classical architecture, columns and symmetry and all that.
Elegant, timeless.
Exactly. But then there's Shelley Avenue, which is kind of a mixed bag, architecturally speaking. Some interesting buildings, some not so interesting.
So right away, we have a design challenge, don't we? How do you reconcile those two different vibes?
Exactly. Should the fire station try to blend the styles? Or should it lean into one or the other? What kind of statement does each choice make? Plus, there's this alleyway running through the site, and the guidelines say we have some options. We can close it off, incorporate it into the design.
Ooh, that alleyway is interesting. You could really get creative with that.
Right. Imagine turning it into a pedestrian walkway, maybe with trees and some seating areas, or even a small amphitheater.
I love that. It could connect Main Street and Shelley Avenue, both physically and maybe even symbolically.
Yeah, I'm already picturing it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got this interesting site and this idea that the fire station needs to reflect the community, but it also has to function as a fire station, obviously. So let's talk about the actual program requirements, the spaces we need to include.
Let's get into the nitty-gritty.
All right, so first up, the vehicle garage. This thing has to be massive, at least 64 feet wide and 42 feet deep to fit those giant fire trucks.
Wow, that's big.
And get this, they want to pass through design so the trucks can drive straight through, no backing in allowed.
Makes sense. Every second counts when you're responding to an emergency.
Exactly. And it goes even deeper than that. I was reading that some fire stations have systems that trigger green lights at intersections as the trucks are leaving, so they can get through traffic even faster.
Really? That's incredible. Technology is amazing.
It is, but it's not all high-tech gadgetry. There's also the fire hose drying tower, which is a pretty cool feature.
It's more than just a place to dry hoses, though, right? The program describes it as a 30-foot tall structure that doubles as a training area for the firefighters.
A 30-foot tower. Talk about a design element. I mean,
Yeah.
that's going to be visible from pretty much anywhere on the site.
Definitely. So you have to think about how it integrates with the overall aesthetic. Do you make it a focal point? Do you try to blend it in?
So many possibilities. This is getting exciting. But okay, before we get carried away with towers, we also have to think about the day-to-day lives of the firefighters who will be living and working here.
Right, the human element.
Exactly. So the program outlines 10 bunk rooms, each designed for a single firefighter. And here's a weird detail. They prefer no windows in the bunk rooms.
Really? No windows?
Nope. Which at first I was like, what? But then I realized it makes total sense.
Oh, I see it. Because they work all sorts of crazy hours, right? They need to be able to sleep during the day if they have to.
Exactly. Like blackout curtains for the win. But of course, it's not all work and sleep. There's also a gym to stay in shape, a spacious living room for downtime, and even a dedicated outdoor terrace, which I'm assuming is for those legendary firehouse barbecues.
Well, yeah, you have to have a place for the barbecue.
Of course. But it's not just about the firefighters, right? This fire station is meant to be a hub for the whole community. And the program really emphasizes that.
So how do they incorporate that?
Well, for starters, they've got this huge multi-purpose training room and community room. It's like 1,600 square feet.
Whoa, that's a lot of space.
It is. And it's meant to accommodate, well, everything. Firefighter training sessions, town meetings, community events. I mean, you could probably fit a yoga class in there, too.
It really sounds like they're trying to make this fire station a central part of the town's life.
Absolutely. And to make it even more welcoming, there's also a community plaza right outside. So you could have
Yeah.
outdoor events, farmers markets, concerts, whatever you can dream up.
This fire station is sounding more and more like the heart of the community.
I know, we've got all these amazing spaces, all these different functions, but how do we actually fit it all together? That's the real design challenge, isn't it? How do we make a building that works for the firefighters, works for the community, and looks incredible?
And how do we make it fit seamlessly into that unique site with its contrasting architectural styles? It's a lot to consider.
It is. But don't worry, we're just getting started. In part two, we're going to dive into some design strategies, exploring different ways to tackle this challenge. So stay tuned.
So we're thinking about this fire station on a site with these two very different feels. Main Street with its historic, classical architecture, and then Shelley Avenue, which is much more of a mixed bag. How do we design a building that fits in with both?
It's a tough one, isn't it? It's almost like we're trying to bridge two different eras. Like, do we try to create a design that kind of blends those two styles together, or do we let one take the lead?
We could definitely try to bridge the gap. Imagine, on the Main Street side, we incorporate those classical elements, the columns, the symmetry, the elegant proportions, and then as the building wraps around to Shelley Avenue, we gradually transition to a more modern aesthetic.
Ooh, I like that, like a visual gradient almost.
Yeah.
So maybe on the Shelley Avenue side, we use more contemporary materials like exposed steel and concrete, maybe play with some dynamic shapes and angles.
Right. And think about the materials. Brick and stone for the Main Street side, maybe. And then, like you said, steel and glass as we move toward Shelley Avenue.
It would be a subtle way of acknowledging the architectural diversity of the town, and it could create a really interesting visual journey as you walk around the building.
It would. And remember that alleyway we talked about? What if, instead of closing it off, we actually incorporated it into the design?
Yes, like a pedestrian walkway that cuts right through the fire station, connecting Main Street and Shelley Avenue.
That's what I'm thinking. Maybe lined with trees, some seating areas, maybe even a little amphitheater for community gatherings.
Oh, I love that. It would be such a cool way to activate that space, and it would draw people into the heart of the fire station.
Exactly. It becomes more than just a building. It becomes a destination, a place for people to gather and connect.
So bridging the styles is one option. But what if instead we really lean into the historic character of Main Street? Like, what if we go full-on traditional?
That could be really beautiful. Think about using those traditional materials, brick, stone, and paying close attention to the proportions and details that are characteristic of classical architecture. We could even incorporate arches and decorative elements that echo the historic buildings on Main Street.
I mean, it would definitely fit in with the neighborhood. But wouldn't it risk making the fire station feel, I don't know, a bit too stuffy? Especially for a building that needs to be, modern and functional.
That's where the challenge lies. It's about finding ways to introduce modern elements within that classical framework. Maybe large expanses of glass to bring in natural light and create a sense of openness, or incorporating sustainable building technologies that weren't available a century ago.
So it's not just about copying the past, it's about reinterpreting it for a modern context.
Exactly. And remember the fire hose drying tower? Imagine how striking a modern tower, maybe made of glass and steel, would look juxtaposed against the traditional brick and stone of the main building. It could be a really powerful statement.
Oh, I see it. It's like this dialogue between the past and the present.
Exactly. And that's what good design is all about, creating those conversations, those unexpected juxtapositions.
But okay, what about the other end of the spectrum? What if, instead of going historic, we go super modern on the Shelley Avenue side, like really push the envelope?
Now, that would be exciting. We could explore more adventurous forms and materials, exposed steel, cantilevered structures, maybe even some green building elements like a rooftop garden or a living wall.
That would definitely turn heads. Remember, the mayor in our story said a well-designed fire station could be better advertising than any billboard.
Right. And this kind of bold, modern design would definitely generate buzz. People would be stopping to take pictures, sharing them on social media.
So we've got options. Bridge the styles, embrace the historic, go full-on modern. Each choice tells a different story about the town and its vision for the future.
And ultimately, that's what makes this design challenge so fascinating. It's not just about creating a beautiful building. It's about creating a building that reflects the values, the history, and the aspirations of the community it serves.
Well said. But now let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about the big picture, the site, the style, But what about the nitty-gritty details, the actual spaces and how they function?
Right. We need to make sure this fire station works as well as it looks. In part 3, we'll delve into the program requirements and explore how we can bring all these different spaces to life.
Okay, so we've talked about the big picture, the site, the style, the whole vibe, but now it's time to get into the nuts and bolts.
Let's get down to brass tacks. Make sure this fire station actually works.
Exactly. We've got a great recipe, so to speak, in the program requirements. So let's start with the most essential ingredient, that massive vehicle garage. We're talking 64 feet wide, 42 feet deep, all to fit those giant fire trucks.
Yeah, those things are no joke.
And they're very specific about the design, too.
Yeah.
It's got to be passed through, no backing in allowed.
Well, it makes sense, right? Time is of the essence when you're responding to an emergency. Every second counts.
Absolutely. And I was reading that some fire stations even have these systems that automatically trigger green lights at intersections when the trucks are leaving the station.
Wow, really? That's amazing. Talk about streamlining the response.
I know. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
But it's not all about speed either. The program also talks about a dedicated decontamination area right inside the garage.
Oh, right. To clean the gear and equipment after a fire. Super important for safety.
Yeah. You don't want those contaminants spreading to other parts of the station, or worse, being brought home to families.
Definitely not. It's those little details that make a big difference.
Absolutely. Okay, and speaking of important details, we can't forget about the fire hose drying tower.
Ah, yes, the iconic tower.
30 feet tall, and it doubles as a training area. So we got to think about durability, materials. I mean, this thing's going to be a visual landmark.
It's interesting, right? Because historically, those towers were crucial. The old hoses were made of natural fibers, so they'd rot if they weren't dried properly.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Nowadays, the hoses are more durable, but the tower still serves a purpose. Ventilation, training, and of course that visual element.
Right. It's like form and function coming together beautifully. Kind of like those spiral staircases in lighthouses. Practical, but also gorgeous.
I see what you mean.
But enough about hoses. Let's talk about the firefighters themselves. They need a place to rest and recharge. The program calls for 10 individual bunk rooms.
So each firefighter gets their own space.
Exactly. And here's where it gets kind of funny. They actually prefer the bunk rooms to have no windows.
No windows! That's weird.
It seemed strange to me at first, too. But then I thought about it. These guys are working all hours of the day and night. They need to be able to sleep whenever they can, no matter how bright it is outside.
That makes sense. Like blackout curtains, but built in.
Exactly. But of course, it's not all work and sleep. They also need spaces to relax and bond as a team. So we've got a spacious living room, a full gym, even a dedicated outdoor terrace for those legendary firehouse barbecues.
You can't forget the barbecues. It's tradition.
It's essential.
Yeah.
But we also have to remember that this fire station isn't just for the firefighters.
Right.
It's designed to serve the whole community.
Right. It's that whole hub concept we talked about.
And the program really drives that home with this huge multi-purpose room. It's called the training room and community room, like 1,600 square feet.
Wow, that's a big room. What kind of stuff are they planning to do in there?
Well, pretty much everything. Firefighter training, obviously, but also town meetings, community events. You could probably fit a yoga class in there, too.
That's amazing. It's really designed to be flexible and accommodate all sorts of needs.
Yeah, exactly. And then to make it even more community-friendly, there's also that community plaza right outside. Imagine farmers markets, movie nights, concerts.
This is really starting to sound like the heart of the town.
I know, right? It's coming together beautifully. We've got a super high-tech garage for quick departures, the iconic fire hose drying tower, comfy living spaces for the firefighters, and a flexible community space that could adapt to just about anything.
It's like all the pieces of the puzzle are fitting together.
They are. But the challenge now is to take all these pieces and create something truly special, something that's not just functional, but also beautiful and meaningful. A building that the entire community can be proud of.
And that's where you, the listeners, come in. You've heard all the information, all the possibilities. Now it's time to put on your architect hats and get creative. What kind of fire station will you design?
We hope this deep dive has inspired you to think differently about the spaces we inhabit and the impact they have on our lives. Whether it's a fire station, a library, or even your own home, design has the power to shape our experiences and connect us to our communities.
Absolutely. So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep designing.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.